Okay.
Hey guys, I'm Brandon,
Hi guys, I'm Beth.
and today we're going to be talking about a little bit about what's been happening, specifically with the shootings in Georgia and with COVID, a increase of Asian American hate crimes. And the purpose of our video today is not really to, we're not really experts in this field. It's just to bring awareness and share our experiences and answer some common questions. And I really think it's like just important to just simply have a conversation about this topic. So that's what we're going to do today. But yeah, we'll hop straight into it and we'll go for the first question. Well, actually, a little bit about ourselves. That's important, right?
Absolutely. So, my name is Beth Young. I'm a current sophomore in high school, and I've spent a lot of time working with different internships and companies like Stop AAPI Hate, which is a big one that's been growing and following and awareness. And our main mission is to not only collect data to show people this is what's happening, we have the facts and the data to back it up, but also collect stories and experiences of people that we feel valuable to share.
Got it, got it. And I'm just Brandon Shi. I'm a college student at NYU Shanghai. But yeah, that's just a simple kind of who we are. But we'll go straight into the questions. Let's start off with our first question. What it's like being or growing up Asian?
Personally, I've often felt really left out. Growing up in a small town, it's hard not to notice that you're kind of the only Asian. You kind of are the only one that looks like you in your friend group or your circle, and your grade often is very difficult to kind of fit in or feel accepted when you eat different foods or you have different culture and different experiences and sometimes even speak a different language.
No,
How
yeah,
was
I totally agree. When I was in elementary school, I even remember the time where, I brought food from home and it just happened to be, dumplings and sometimes other foods. Like when I was young in fifth and sixth grade, a common like breakfast slash lunch staple in my household was porridge. And so we had porridge with meat floss and sometimes duck egg. And to me, that was a perfectly normal breakfast, but I think, or lunch. And for a lot of people, especially, at our school and whatnot, I think I was the odd one out. I was like the only kid that I can see in that group who was bringing food like that. And when I wasn't really bringing the same food as everyone else, like sandwiches and apples and, all these normal foods that, we would eat and serve at lunch, I don't know, it made me feel a little bit out of place sometimes. So our second question is, what type of misconceptions and assumptions do Asian Americans face, and why are they harmful?
I think for many people, one of the first ones that comes to mind is the stereotype or misconception that all Asians are good at math. And the reason this can be harmful for some people is when not every Asian is good at math, it kind of stresses them out and really impacts mental health. This happened to me personally. I know I'm not the best at math,
Mm.
and it was really hard to have all of these people expect me to be good at math and like ask me to tutor them or ask me to help them. And I tried to do the best I could, but ultimately, I just had to say like, "Hey, I'm not really that great at math, but we can
Yeah,
totally work together."
totally
And
agree.
yeah, absolutely. And while there are Asians that are really good at math, this is not something that we should just automatically assume of everybody. Microaggressions can come in so many forms. They can come with name calling or slurs, stereotypes, and jokes that can often seem innocent or harmless when we really aren't aware of the truth. I know many of us grew up kind of laughing off these jokes or just like ignoring when people would call us names or call us weird or mock our eyes and the way we look. And truly, I don't think many of us were really aware of like how harmful this was really to a lot of people and a lot of our mental health and kind of changes our self-esteem and our self-confidence, which is really important to us.
No, yeah. I mean, even today's society, just the other day I saw on TikTok in New York, they were, saying like ching chong, ling long, and all these things to, an Asian person, and when confronted and recorded, the man was like, that's not racist. And so even today, like in today's society in 2021, this still happens. And it's been happening, right? We talk about it all the time, like, and it sucks that something so major, like, the shootings had to happen for people to kind of realize. But it's been happening from a young age, and even before we were born, like, and so I think the best way for us to do is just kind of bring awareness to it.
Absolutely. My parents always tell me stories of them experiencing the same things I'm experiencing even today. And it's so hard to see how it's taken us years to even come to start this movement and start growing more followings or attention to what's been happening for so many decades.
No, yeah, totally agree. So our third question is, racism towards Asian Americans is normalized. And I think it's really amplified within nowadays, right? Especially with COVID, and especially, what's been happening recently. I think being blamed for COVID, and especially as someone like me as Chinese descent, and I go to school in China. And even like the rhetoric we have today in our society of politics, right? When we call the coronavirus, the COVID-19, the Kung flu, or the China virus, that just has like derogatory words directly in the sentence. And so some people might be thinking like, oh, it's okay to call it the China virus. It came from China. But when you associate a place with like a virus, right, it leads to this connotation and this connection in people's minds subconsciously. It's kind of like, oh, well, China brought it in. So whatever happens with the virus is like, oh, that's China's fault, even though it's not necessarily that fault, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Seeing people like our president or ex-president, past president, address things in such a public light, in such a massively exposed form of communication and media was really hard to see for many of myself and my friends and my family. And it was hard to really explain to my overseas relatives who were kind of talking about coming to America to visit and kind of see how we are. And it was really hard to explain to them that this is not a good time to come because they would be like direct targets for so many things, like the name calling and just people generally telling them that they have the virus just because
Yeah.
they look Chinese. And a big part of this is also assuming that every Asian is Chinese when this is not true. And this has led to so many reportings of people being attacked for bringing COVID when they may not even be of Chinese descent.
Oh, I totally agree. I wish people understood that, just because someone's Asian doesn't mean they're Chinese, right? There's so many different cultures and ethnicities within, right? And so I think just acknowledging that is like one of the first steps, right? And so our fourth question, or not questions, it's more of a statement, but our fourth statement is the media's representation of Asians, right? And so one of the things that initially came up to me when we brainstormed this question and idea was that growing up, we didn't really have any, for me at least, I didn't have any role models to look at, right? Growing up Asian American and, in the States, it's like, who are your role models? Oh, it's, okay, the president, okay, the singers, okay, the astronauts, right? All those, I guess, positions didn't really have Asian people who are in leadership. It's a lot more prevalent today, but even when I was younger, maybe like 5-10 years ago, I don't remember physically having those, role models.
Yeah, me too. I know growing up, it was really hard to see influencers or people or like Barbies that looked like me or had the same skin tone as me. And I know this is a struggle that's still going on today in like makeup companies or that aren't fairly formulated for our skin tones, and they don't market the way other companies should because they don't have like Asian models, they don't have like Asian people in their marketing, and it's really hard for some people to find the products they need because they don't know how it's going to look on them and they don't want to waste that money.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the times when people ask me about my role models, they'd be like, oh, Yao Ming, Jeremy Lin, very typical or like overused role models in some ways, where people just automatically assumes like the first Asian name they saw on TV was going to be everybody's role model.
Exactly. No, yeah. I mean, hopefully one day we can be our own role models, But I think times are changing. I really hope with everything that's been happening, I think we're doing our job just having this conversation. I think that's so important. We're not experts. We don't know everything about what to do and what not to do. But I think just having this conversation is so, so important and like so monumental for just us to, you know, build these foundational steps to continue to, I guess, like pave our way for our own, being our own role models.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
role models for future generations.
exactly, exactly. Like I want my kids to, you know, eventually think back and be like, oh, okay, you know, I want them to be proud being Asian. You know, I don't want them, when I was younger, I used to, this is a hard truth, but when I was younger, I remember sometimes I thought that I wish I wasn't Asian, you know? I wish I wasn't Asian so I could fit in more. So people didn't make fun of my food, my
Yeah.
culture, didn't call me ching chong, ling long, whatever. You know, I sometimes wish that I was a different race, you know, and that's so, so hard like to wrap your mind around. But I just wish that would never happen to my future kids. You know, I want them to be proud of who they are and what they are and where they come from, right?
Absolutely. I think a big common experience for many Asian people is like going home in middle school or elementary school and saying, I don't want to bring this food to school anymore. I just get made fun of for it. I want Lunchables like everybody else. I want peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And it's really hard to think back on it, knowing that like our parents oftentimes they don't say I love you, but they do it through actions. They make you food, they take you to school and they take you like commute anywhere you need to. And it's really hard to think about younger me going home just telling my parents flat out like I don't want to be Asian, I don't want to bring this food to school, I wish I was white, I wish I looked like my Barbies, because that's is honestly just a societal standard. Like that's what some people consider pretty, and it's really hard to see that even kids today are still going through this, and why haven't we changed yet?
No, yeah, I totally agree. So, I mean, this is our first steps, you know, taking the first steps to change stuff, right? All right, that was a heavy one. Our fifth topic slash idea is conflict of culture. I want to talk about the conflict of culture between American culture and, you know, for me, my experience would be Chinese culture. I'm not, I can't speak for other cultures. It's just because I'm not from the other cultures, but at least for my experience, what I've noticed, like for the conflicts of culture between America and between China, differences in culture can between like the food and lifestyle, but the biggest one that stood out to me was America is as a whole is very individualistic, right? And so it's a very dog eat dog world, right? So like whatever you do is by yourself and you work towards this thing to become a leader and whatnot. But what I noticed in China when I was there for school, China's very collective. Like this, they have this collective mindset, and I don't want to generalize everyone, but it's more of a, I guess, like a just a generalize, kind of a generalization, I guess. But you get what I mean. But China being collective, they kind of think of people as a whole, as a group, right? They don't always think of who's going to be the leader, who's going to be the CEO, who's going to do this, who's, you know, they think of like we as a group have to benefit, right? And so that brings me to like the whole situation with COVID, like for example, when COVID originated in China and everything that was happening in surrounding countries, when it started spreading, one of the first things I noticed was that all my friends in China had to go straight on lockdown, right? And they locked down for 2-3 months without going out of the house at all. And it seems a little strict, but everyone at the time has this group mindset that we can't care about ourselves. We have to care about everyone, right? And so they're willing to sacrifice this, you know, 2 months of freedom, 3 months of freedom for the overall benefit of their society, right? And it's evident, like, look at now today, if we look at in China, like specifically Shanghai, my friends are out adventuring, having fun, partying. The masks are optional. Like it's a lot more relaxed, and COVID is not really a really big threat there anymore, as opposed to America, where when we didn't really lock down, we locked down for a little bit, but you know, we wanted to reopen and people weren't really following regulation and going out and whatnot. And so I think that's a really big difference in culture, that what I've noticed between, for me at least, between China and America.
Again, also with the conflict of culture, I wanted to bring up people who are mixed. This is something a lot of my friends have talked about and experienced, where if someone is half Asian, half white, or a different ethnicity, they
Mm.
often experience a conflict where they don't feel white enough or they don't feel Asian enough, and they're never fully one thing. So it's hard for them. They've talked on and on about like struggles with balancing both cultures together while
Wow.
still maintaining like parts of each one and not completely forgetting or abandoning one, which is something I really empathize with. And I definitely see how they struggle with that.
No, I totally agree. That actually is super relatable. I'm actually not mixed. I'm Chinese, Taiwanese, mixed, but not like mixed with, Chinese and white or Chinese and whatnot. But when I, even now today, like I always got this compliment. I'll tell you the compliment, but it reminded me of a dual-edged sword. And so this compliment was, wow, you're really attractive for an Asian. And at first you're like, okay, thanks. I appreciate it. You think I'm attractive, whatever, right? And you really think about like what that, compliment actually means.
Yeah.
It really, at first, I really didn't notice. When I was, in high school, when you get a compliment from someone, you're like, oh, yes, thank you so much. You kind of, guys don't really get that many compliments, So I really treasured it. But then I kind of realized like, there's something wrong there. There's definitely something wrong when someone says I'm more attractive than does that make sense? Like,
I was just actually just about to bring that up. I think that compliment where something that's supposed to be nice ends with
Mhm.
for an Asian ends up turning it into almost an insult where
Yeah,
people are like, you're really pretty for an Asian. Like
yeah.
that kind of like double expectation, double-edged sword again.
Hmm.
It's really hard because you're like, oh, thank you. Wait, no. And you kind of
Yeah,
just have to take a step back and be like, what? And kind of
yeah,
absorb or like digest what they really just said. Because
yeah.
I think some people kind of think it's okay. Like they
Mhm.
say it so nonchalant or casually. But when it ends with for an Asian, you kind of like take a step back, like, whoa. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
You're right. You're completely right. It's like it's a compliment to you, but it's an insult to my culture, my heritage, who I am as a person. And so maybe on the outside, sure, you're attractive, you're pretty, whatever. But it's at the end of the day, you're right. It's an insult. And I think nowadays it's not as prevalent. I
Yeah.
think people are becoming more aware, and that's the end goal,
Yeah.
And I always say everyone makes mistakes, like as long as we, acknowledge them and grow from them, then there's obviously no problem. And for the people who said that to me, I mean, I'm sure they didn't know that was bad.
I think a lot of high schoolers and middle schools and teens aren't always taking those active steps to really educate themselves,
Hmm.
which is something I've seen change vastly especially during quarantine and pandemic, where so many people are taking these steps to really educate themselves and have these difficult conversations with our friends and with our families, which are so valuable, especially with older generations who aren't as exposed to the types of internet and social media that we may be. And so I think it's really important to educate and discuss these things with our parents and our grandparents and everyone, honestly. Because I think we all know hate is truly a learned thing. And I think, especially with the public school system, it's really hard to see like your culture or your ethnicities seen in a positive light in history classes or in like English classes. It's really hard to see yourself in the history book when it's mainly talking about US history and white people in history.
Totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, yeah, we'll just take steps, it's not a overnight change. But I think things have drastically improved, and so that's our goal, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So that was our 5 questions, but what now? Right. And so I think the biggest takeaway, if I could say one thing, and the biggest takeaway of all of this conversation, I would just say be more open-minded, right? And then Beth, you wanted to add on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being open-minded and open to change is really important and really normalize talking about these things, talking about like what's happening in the news lately and talk about it. Even when it's not a major news event happening, we should still be talking about it and still really educating people and providing people with resources to read or to watch videos on more about what's happening. I know a lot of Asian American celebrities and influencers on social media are also posting videos similar to ours, which is really good to see because then so many more people are exposed to this and so many more people are able to watch these and educate themselves and really have that change of mind. And I think
Mhm.
another good thing to do was when you see microaggressions or you experiencing them yourselves, please don't be afraid to stand up. I know when I was younger, this was something hard for me. I didn't want to seem aggressive or rude
Oh,
and
yeah.
mean. And but deep down inside, I knew I should really be speaking up every time someone assumed I was good at math or assumed I was going to be a doctor, and really tell them that this is not okay to expect and assume
Mhm.
of every Asian, and to really try and educate themselves on harmful impacts on our mental health and how it really harms our family and our just
Yeah.
self-image.
No, totally agree. I encourage anyone and everyone who's watching, if you have questions
Mhm.
about maybe what it's like being in Asian America, or any questions you guys can think of, this is a judgment free zone. If you don't know, we can talk about it and whatnot. And some of these questions and topics are actually from people we polled on Instagram, and so we wanted to get their ideas and thought process into these questions. So I think that's it, right? I mean,
Yeah. Thank you
we're
so much for tuning in, listening to our stories and what we have to say. It's really
yeah,
meaningful to us.
no, yeah, I appreciate it, guys. As always, you guys can leave down a comment below. We'll do our best to answer them.
Yeah.
And if you want to contact any of us, we'll leave our contact. My contact is Brandon Shee _ on Instagram. And then go ahead, Beth, if you want to.
Oh yeah, my Instagram handle is beth.young, Yeung, and we'll probably also put it in the comments or the caption somewhere below. If you guys want to message us, email us, anything, feel free to tag us in a comment if you wanted to ask a question. We'll try to answer as soon as possible. Again, this is a really safe space for you to ask questions. No judgment. We will ask them or respond to them as appropriate.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for your time, and hope you guys have an awesome possum rest of your day. All right. All right. Thanks, Beth. Thanks for having us, or thanks for having this conversation. Okay. Bye, Beth.